overstating the case that I believe we're really well positioned for 2021. I continue to be really excited by the work we accomplished and by what it's pointing to, both at Snowball and at Golden Lion. We really know exactly where we need to go and where we need to target the drills to hopefully really knock it out of the park next summer.
So welcome everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm sitting down today with Kevin Keough, CEO of Evergold. Kevin, how you doing today?
Oh, good. Thanks, John.
Well, it's nice to talk to you. I know you've had a busy summer. Any overall thoughts on how happy you were with things, the program overall in the summer? Are you pretty happy with what you found?
I think we have to be realistic, John, that we didn't hit it out of the ballpark at either Snowball or Golden Lion this summer. And as I've said to many of our investors, of course, we hope to do that in the first days of work, and we didn't. But we did accomplish a great deal and learned a lot. And I'm not overstating the case that I believe we're really well positioned for 2021. I continue to be really excited by the work we accomplished and by what it's pointing to, both at Snowball and at Golden Lion. We really know exactly where we need to go and where we need to target the drills to hopefully really knock it out of the park next summer. So well positioned for 2021. I know it's been a bit of a disappointment to some of our investors, shareholders. It was to me, of course, too, the fact that we didn't get, long intercepts of really high grade. But we got high grades, certainly at Snowball. I think we'll get longer intercepts there next year, a potentially very high grade. And at Golden Lion, it is a big zone we've drilled into that also has the promise of a lot of gold and also high grades, but we need to do more drilling. That's really what it's all about.
And is it fair to say, Kevin, that going into the season, you had the two targets, Snowball and Golden Lion, you were excited about them both? I think in chats that we've had before, you indicated to me that your expectation was you would probably end up killing one of the projects and likely sticking with one or the other. Then it's fair to say, based on what you just said to me, that both projects are still in play. You actually think there's good potential at both, and 2021 Snowball and Golden Lion are both potential, with the right drilling and drilling the right way and getting the right intercepts, things turn around pretty quickly. Is that fair?
I think it's true that we had really hoped to come away from last summer with a kind of saddle discovery type of situation where we actually hit it on our first go around. That didn't occur, but we are certainly positioned now to do so, I think, next year. That's true. And it's genuinely exciting what's going on there on both these properties. We have a high grade unfolding, largely untouched discovery in the heart of the Golden Triangle at Snowball. And although over at Golden Lion, Newmont did the work they did long ago, our ability to confirm what they did and now to show that it's potentially much sweeter just below, I think that's really important because that's new. Newmont didn't know it. I may have said Noranda there with regard to Golden Lion, but it was Newmont that did the work at Golden Lion and Noranda that did early work at Snowball. Yeah, but that was much lower and to the south. So what we're drilling at Snowball, or what we drilled, that is last summer at Snowball, Pyramid Peak, Snowball Ridge, that's never been touched before.
Yeah. So let's move on to the two projects then, and maybe we'll start with Golden Lion because that's kind of the freshest news that you have. Okay, so this slide here is the plan view of Golden Lion. What should be the key takeaways that you think investors should get from the results and what you've learned to date?
Well, dealing with the plan view, the first thing I would say is scale potential. What you're looking at there with the geology plan. The colored lines are the soil anomalies for silver and zinc, both of which are very good pathfinders for the gold. So firstly, the scale, that's like 500 meters from the bottom right corner down near the legend box up to the top left. So it's a substantial scale. Secondly, you'll notice the fault that runs along immediately to the right of the colored lines. Yeah. That's actually the Stuhini-Hazelton contact, which is in British Columbia, known by some as the BCGS red line. It seems that in the Golden Triangle, of which this Stikine terrain over in the Toodoggone here at Golden Lion is part, it's all a Stikine terrain, same geology pretty much. That contact seems to be where most of the major deposits in the Golden Triangle have historically been found, and we're right next to it, just as we are at Snowball, and just as we were and are at Saddle for GT Gold. So you've got scale, you've got ideally positioned a zone, ideally positioned geologically next to that major regional fault. And you'll also notice a zoning effect there. When you look at plan view, you see the silver trend zone on the bottom part of the image, and you see the GL1 main zone, which is really gold predominant. The silver trend zone, we really haven't put any holes into yet. GL1 main, the gold zone, is where most of our holes this year have gone in. But I might add that in our hole 7, which is shown on one of the sections there, you started to see a hint of the silver trend zone, we believe, in that hole. We can look at that in another slide or two. So the takeaway here, so here we have the section, that's section 602.510. On the left of the image, that's southwest. We're kind of viewing things northwest. That hole, and I'm going to get my cursor here. Can you see that, John?
I can't see your cursor, but I just drew a
circle around it. Actually, I believe I can draw there now too. So here, I think that's working. That's hole 7. This is all hole 7 here. Now, over here, these holes on the right, these seem to be gold predominant. But in hole 7 here, we start to see some very sharp spikes, including multiple meter intercepts of sub-economic silver, but the very strong, up to 80 grams per ton over a single sample that was 2 meters in length, for example, and then you had multiple sort of 40 to 60s over several samples here. That's very interesting. That would seem to match up with the idea that over to the left, perhaps, we've got silver predominant zonation. To the right, perhaps, gold predominant. But it's really early days, and we may be wrong about that, but it does hint toward what we see in the plan view, i.e. the zonation effect. So I think viewers should take away from all of this at the minute that there's been relatively little drilling done, and we do not understand yet what's really going on here, or indeed really where the best of this zone is going, whether it's vertical. As you can see here, there's some suggestion it could be vertical this way. Newmont historically thought it was down to the northeast this way. Our geophysics suggests there's good potential down to the southwest this way. So the point is, it's early days. This is a lovely chargeability high down here. That should, so investors or shareholders understand, the chargeability is generally associated with the degree of sulfide in the rock, right? Whereas over here on the left, the resistivity is generally associated with more silicification. Well, you'll notice these are the same sections, just one is resistivity, one is chargeability. They're coincident, right? This and that. that's something you really want to see. Now, it's entirely possible that we've got real juice down here, and at the same time, it could be possible that we're going to get values down here too. The geophysical imagery tends to look kind of there's some depth to it, right? This side of the section, that side of the section. And so it's not a precise matchup section to section with the drilling. We'll just have to see how matters unfold as we do more work. But to give you an idea, the tenor of that chargeability anomaly down there, it's up 9.5 or 10 millivolt per volt. That is similar to what we had at for GT Gold at the Saddle South discovery, which is going to emerge into a large, relatively high-grade open pit vein zone. So it's quite exciting. It's something, this sort of imagery that we're looking at here was totally unknown to previous operators. They didn't do this work. Right. They didn't do this detailed work.
So next year then, conceptually, I mean, you kind of show it on the diagram already, but you could be drilling kind of from the same pad, maybe testing right into that resistivity high and chargeability high, both, right? It's a coincident, hole.
Yes.
Because right now, like, this is your closest hole, say hole number 7. You're just sort of skirting that edge of the blue, and you're just sort of, skirting the edge of the chargeability high over on the right.
Yes, so obviously this is a candidate, a prime candidate for follow-up. What we will do is gather in the remaining assays. We have another, if we go back to the plan view, John, there we are. So you see we'll have holes from this section coming shortly. So this section we're just looking at was this one here. We are awaiting assays for the remainder of our GL1 main holes, which include a cluster of them here, and of course hole 16 over here. We'll see what they give us, and then we will model it, and we'll make our best determination as to where we think the best of this system is and where it's going. And it's probably going to take us several holes and maybe several pads to really figure that out. But we'll just take it a step at a time. We're clearly onto it here, right? I mentioned in the news release that the way we set up holes from this pad, from the other pad, we basically have scissored the zone. And if you go back to the section view, it doesn't show as well. It'll show better on when the next results. Well, here, yes, as well. So there we have drilling vertical, near vertical, into the southwest, and in the previous section, we're drilling more to the east-northeast. So, and I think a takeaway for a lot of investors too is that all of these holes collared into this zone. So they collared into it, and as you can see, even over in the right of the image here, we're getting hits way down here. Like we never fully exit the system. So it's really indeterminate. Go back to the previous section view, John. So again, have a look at this image here. Do you see these hits down here? The silver, a lot of silver. You're getting hits way down here. So we don't really understand how broad ultimately the system is, but we do know from our modeling and our drilling, our own drilling, coupled with modeling of Dumont's results, that it is at least 100 meters wide. And where else have you seen recently in our business major discoveries associated with major fault zones? Well, people like Great Bear, for example, it's these are structurally related deposits that can have considerable widths to them, and they can have considerable strike lengths, and they can go a long, long way to depth. We appear to have one here.
So, in summary, too, for just to ensure everyone gets a sense of the scale, you were saying earlier that we're looking at, if I guess if I draw it on the map here, roughly 500 meters along strike, and then you were saying about 100 meters across width-wise so far?
Minimum width,
okay.
yeah. And just on this image, that's hole 16. When I talk about 500 meters, that's from hole 16 here up to, I can't quite clearly see it on the software we're using, it's up to hole 9, which I believe is just up here, top left. So that's 500 meters along there. So hole 16, we indicated, we believe we've hit the same system in that hole. I think I've told a lot of people that we use XRF as a tool, a very effective tool in the field for telling us whether we've got certain key pathfinder elements, such as lead and zinc. Here at Golden Lion, GO1 Main, lead and zinc are really the two key pathfinders, to lesser degree silver. If you see lead and zinc well above background, you're into the system, coupled with the visuals. The drilling here, there's a potassic element to the rock, the alteration, coupled with the silicification I mentioned before, a lot of veining, etc. And these veins are really diffuse throughout. It's no one single vein. It's a lot of veins, and the rock is altered, potassically altered, etc. Sulfides like galena, sphalerite, bit of chalcopyrite here and there, pyrite. Anyway, we use XRF. It gives us a pretty good guide, although you can't rely on the individual numbers, and it doesn't show you gold values unless you have sometimes really, really high gold. It might kick sometimes, but generally it'll give you a good reading of the approximate values for the lead and zinc on this deposit, and we can identify, coupled with the visuals, the zone. And for that reason, we're pretty confident in hole 16. We'll see what the assays come back. We're potentially, we'll cross our fingers. We're excited about the prospects for that hole. But I must tell you, we're really happy with all the results to date, because all the holes we put in here seem to hit. And another takeaway, I would point out, if we got numbers like the numbers we've already put out, the getting up to 100-meter true widths of this bulk tonnage style numbers, 0.7, 0.8. And by the way, people should note, on all these holes, there's always multiple meter intercepts, sometimes up 20 meters, that kind of thing, of plus 1 gram material, 2, 3 grams, right? If we were getting those results down in Nevada, they'd be all over us. Of course, Nevada has some historically known high-grade plays like Midas and all, but generally a lot of what they mine and get excited about down there is pretty low-grade stuff. The thing is, they can heap leach it. It's an easier environment to work in. But, we've got potentially very competitive grades and widths already from what we're doing there. We just need to do more work.
And would your expectation be, Kevin, that if you were to drill into some of the, the resistivity highs, the chargeability highs next year, that on top of these bulk tonnage, like longer intercepts of relatively lower grade, you could potentially be into much higher grade material? Or do you think this is going to be more of a bulk tonnage system?
You can't say at the minute what it's really. It's too early to say, John.
Okay.
I mean, this system, people have to look at those assay results that we've already published. They will see that within these broad intercepts, there are always, in every hole, higher grade subintervals. And it won't take us much, assuming if the geophysics is correct and that this system is potentially sweetening up at depth. It will not take us much to get up into moderate and potentially very high grade material. Again, we've we've sampled, if it's silver, for example, we have actually sampled really high-grade material. In the silver trend we're looking at here on slide 37, we got that 13 kilograms. I mean, this is over 13,000 grams per ton, right? That was sampled in outcrop. Now, it was a very narrow 30 centimeter rather vein outcropping up here, kind of on the slope up here. That was us early this year. We announced, well, we did the sampling in 2019, but announced it early this year. The drilling that Newmont did down here in these holes, they got in some of these holes multiple narrow intercepts of 16, 18, 20 ounces per ton silver, right? So there's definitely a high silver trend. That's it, and it's open, coupled with the gold trend also open. And these are, some people have asked me, well, are they related? Of course they are related. There is a zonation effect, and it's common that you do get this zonation effect in epithermal deposits. Often the silver is outboard to some of the other zones, common in a lot of mineral deposits if you have zonation, but they're all related to the same system.
Do you have a good feel for exactly where you're going to be drilling next year? Like, is there going to be a focus? Would you be focusing on both the gold and the silver trend, or one more than the other?
I think we would obviously try to focus on the gold. Let's face it, right? I mean, for every, you need 80 of these, 80 silver grams to account for one gold. So as we do have a good sense, there's, in fact, Sprott in one of the reports there a couple of weeks ago commenting on our news release said, it's a lot of gold there. That's what they said. Mm-hmm. Nothing new yet in terms of the results, because they're similar here at GL1 Main to Newmont, but there's a lot of gold. That's what Sprott said. That's true. What is new, and what potentially is blowout for next season, are our geophysical results, which point to it being much sweeter, just below where we are.
Right.
That's exciting. So
I know, Kevin, before you started drilling at Golden Lion, I think you had Golden GL2 and GL3 as well. Did anything come from any of those targets, and would you be sort of doing any work further next year, 2021, to do more exploration there, or do you think the focus is going to be mostly on Golden Lion GL1?
I think the focus will continue to be mostly here at GL1, subject to receiving our further assays and evaluating those, but that clearly seems to be where we've got critical mass at the minute, John. As for the regional targets, you may recall we had GL1 North Ridge, just to the north here. We put a hole in there, got a lot of magnetite. We don't actually have those assays back yet, but so what we've done with the assay process is try to prioritize, obviously, the results from GL1 Main. GL1 North Ridge, I don't anticipate anything too exciting from up there. There's a bit of a disappointment, that particular hole. But what's interesting, we've also done a lot of additional soils here, not just at GL1 Main, but up to the northeast there and down to the southeast a long way. And we've got some really good results out of this trend. So GL1 Northridge was one hole we put in. We also did holes on the Skarn target. We call it the GL2 Skarn target. We put a couple of holes in over there. We had some, what I would describe as encouraging short intercepts of Skarn type mineralization. We'll see what the assays come back. You can expect there'd be some copper in that over there. Should be some gold and silver too. But what we're really looking for in any of these holes is, of course, a combination of width and grade that will instantly catch our attention. So we have that at GL1 Main. We didn't get to testing GL3 which remains a rather intriguing polymetallic target. In a way, it may be associated along strike somehow with what's going on here, but it's a long way along strike down to the southeast, kind of curving back north again. We've tested on the other side of the ridge from GL1 main here, just over here to the northeast. We're getting strong values along the slopes up here in geochemistry, and there was some testing done there. That story is probably going to require more work, but there's a lot going on in terms of geochemistry at GL1. Widespread geochemical anomalies. So I think we feel that there's a lot more to the Golden Lion story than GL1 main alone. But we'll focus here and really try to open it up, and we'll give further thought to these other targets and see if we can't enhance it.
Okay. Let's pivot over to Snowball here, Kevin, quickly. You got some really nice high-grade intercepts, but pretty narrow. So basically the opposite of what you got at Golden Lion. So you had nice long intercepts there, lower grade. Snowball, you were into the double-digit gold numbers, but much shorter intervals. What's the plan for next year for Snowball? I know you have two conceptual slides here about how these vein systems might be oriented and how the drilling this year probably missed them. Maybe you could explain how you've kind of come up with these two potentials, and where do you think you're going to target next year?
So let's go back here, John. So this is slide 20 in our presentation. And by the way, for all the viewers out there, this is, of course, mounted up on the website and dated December 2nd, I believe it was. So the bit of the backstory at Snowball, for those who are not familiar with it, this property had been worked by Noranda way back in the early 1990s, but they were working 500 meters roughly to the south down there and about the same distance in elevation below. So they had developed a strong gold and silver in soils anomaly. They started with regional sediment sampling in the streams and picked up some anomalies. And at that time in the early 90s, everybody was excited about another potential Escape discovery. And that's what they were looking for down around Snowball Pond, which is kind of at the foot of Pyramid Peak. They did a few holes and they got high-grade veins. They trenched there as well. Developed a very strong, enhanced the soil geochemistry anomaly. Then they let it lapse. That was the early 90s. And when we took it on back in 2016, we firstly modeled their results, and it was evident to us that the anomaly they had developed at the time, which was quite impressive, their grid was open upslope. So their grid, sampling grid, kind of stopped down here roughly. And it was open in this direction upslope. It was clearly open. I had shown this on a number of slides in our historical presentations. And long and short of it is, we decided we would go back and or take on the property and expand the sampling. So in 2016, we came up here to Snowball Ridge, and we walked along the ridge. We sampled all along the ridge. Then we climbed up on Pyramid Peak and sampled all the way up there and down here too. And it was quite an eye-opener when we got the results back, because all of these samples, especially here in Pyramid Peak, were running strong values. I'm talking about strong values for soils. It's kind of talus fines, but they were, 500 ppb material, sometimes multiple grams of gold in regularly spaced sampling up the slope. So that was 2016. In 2017 and 18, we went back and we peppered the whole of Pyramid Peak here with sampling. And basically, long and short of it is, we ended up with a target here at Pyramid Peak, roughly 250 meters in all directions. The talus fines of which ran on average over 0.7 of a gram per ton. There were like 40 samples running an average of 0.7, and that excluded the high grade. We had even a 25 grammer in some of the soils here. So, and the median value was just under 500 ppb. That's a whopping strong gold in soils anomaly. It was very similar to what we had at Saddle in the early going before we drilled it. So the problem with Pyramid Peak as an exploration challenge for this past year, one of the issues has been that Pyramid Peak is really weathered. If any of you have seen photos I have of it, and I've shown a lot of these photos around, it's very oxidized. There's a good one. Very reddish. This is all oxidized. When you're standing on this stuff, it's near impossible to tell what you're really standing on. It's all crumbly rock. You can't even tell what the rock often really was before it was altered. So because this is this area that's carrying the very high arsenic in soil, gold in soil, silver in soil, polymetallic, even copper in soil. So we opted to build our first pad up here, called the Apex pad. And there was a reason for it, because we built the pad so we could drill 360 degrees. We could not tell what the orientation of these presumably structures were, which were hosting the gold values that are scattered all over the place. So the idea was just to drill all azimuths up there and get a handle for what was going on. As it turned out, literally our first hole this year, we targeted this direction, drilling to the southwest rather, along that dotted line. And we actually ended up getting visible arsenopyrite in our first few meters after getting through casing. And that was exciting. I guess as it turned out, we basically struggled all summer long to determine with some confidence what the orientation of the structures were. We weren't actually able to really do that. By late in the season, we had decided that there were probably two principal structures, one oriented as you see this dashed line is oriented, and the other in the opposite direction to the northwest. And that's on some of the other images we were looking at. Here we go. You see, this is one interpreted orientation for some of these structures. And this is very much simplified, obviously. And then the other orientation this way. It's almost certain that there are at least these two orientations, and they're probably not as pretty as you see them there, right? And there's possibly more. So, but what we do have confidence, although you're correct that we got narrow high-grade intercepts, some photos of which I've included in this PowerPoint, our sense was that we were largely drilling parallel or sub-parallel to the predominant orientation up there on Pyramid Peak. So here's where we were drilling up top here, right? And
so something like that, Kevin? Sorry to interrupt.
Not in our earliest drilling, John. Our drilling was actually that way to the southwest.
Okay.
Southwest, you see. Let's go back. So we were drilling this way. And we obviously drill that way most of the time because that's where we saw the most arsenopyrite. Now remember, we're drilling blind in a sense. Of course, you were asking before, John, about challenges we faced this summer at Snowball. And I'll briefly mention here, we had a number of challenges that kind of made it more difficult this year. One was the weather. Big issue, the weather. It was worse up there in this part of the world, truly much worse than it has been in years. It meant we started the season later, so like 2 weeks behind schedule. And that was all about the weather. Then when we got up here drilling at this pad, any of your investors who might have ever been to South Africa might be familiar with Table Mountain and the effect they get with the winds coming in off the ocean, rising up the mountain, and then going over the top. And there's always a cloud in behind in the lee of the mountain. They call it the devil's blanket, right? Well, you know, you have almost exactly the same phenomena here at Pyramid Peak. The winds predominantly come from the southwest up the mountain, and there's almost always a foggy cloud sitting in behind. You might note this is all ice here too. This is glacier, right, in behind. Mm-hmm. So why that was a big issue for us, the pilots won't fly if it's foggy. And often during the day at Pyramid Peak, even if it was sunny all around, it would be cloudy on this darn peak. So our productivity on the drilling was honestly half what we anticipated it would be. So weather meant longer to get going. Productivity, we didn't actually finish the drilling here till like the middle or 18th of August, well behind schedule. That in turn impacted production of results, coupled with which everybody knows about, it's been a really bad year for assay turnaround times. And that's simply because in northern BC, all the work's focused on 3 or 4 months. And our programs were not very large compared to Tudor or some of the other companies. There have been new labs established like MSA that have got operations up and going, but they've just been overwhelmed. So all of these things impacted our news flow and our ability to finance. And we've been quite open about that this fall, right? We decided that we would wait for assays to come back and darn those before putting out additional news or closing a financing rather. And the assays just dragged and dragged and dragged, and they're still dragging, quite frankly, today. So the takeaway, though, these are all, you might say, these are first-year challenges. Weather we can't do a lot about. This issue with the fog at Pyramid Peak, well, I don't think that's going to be such a challenge this coming year because we have a better understanding of that, and we know now where we can position pads. And I think it's important for investors to realize that's a high-grade system we've drilled. It has potentially very, very strong results lurking there somewhere because we have sampled some of that material in outcrop or subcrop, like float boulders. I think I've shown earlier in this presentation, for people who care to look, John, there is a boulder. This is the one, slide 25. And on the left, that table are just some of the samples of float and material that we picked off the surface. You can see some of these are really impressive numbers. Gold, silver, look at some of the silver numbers, like that's over 1,000 grams here, right? Mm-hmm. These and this boulder on the right, by the way, of course, that's your typical style at Snowball. There's a lot of arsenopyrite up here, sphalerite, arsenopyrite, carbonate, some quartz too. This is impressive stuff, and I think we're going to actually drill next season some of it in a way that we weren't able to this year. So if we go to, let's go, John, to the, have a good look at Pyramid Peak itself. Do you have okay, this is a good image here. So we struggled with our drilling this year from Apex pad up here. We've proven it's in the rocks there. So it's booming high anomalism here. What we were unable to do from up there this season, and that's a long way, it's hundreds of meters from that pad down to here, for example, right? We actually, and I've told people about this, we mentioned it, we went back in September after the drilling stopped, and we sampled, did a lot of detailed sampling, and actually started to dig into the mountainside at the base of Pyramid Peak here, down in this area. And we've got some terrific looking visual, I'm talking visuals from the material that we sampled down here. We couldn't reach, we were sort of trying this year to get down here, but we couldn't from up there.
Sorry, Kevin, I just, sorry to interrupt you. I can't actually see where you're referring to.
Can you see that?
Oh, I see that now. Yep, there we go.
Yes. So the point being that this, in a system like this, you can imagine that there's probably going to be zones within it that are much superior in terms of their values, their grades, than elsewhere. We've sampled down here, for example, very juicy looking breccia veins, arsenopyrite rich veins. These are not tiny, narrow little things, but you know, they appear to have a couple meters width and to go up into the hillside for tens of meters. A lot of this work we were doing just in September. We did a lot of sampling, detailed sampling of the talus fines. We don't even have the results of any of this work back yet, but we know visually that it should return very encouraging results. So there will be news from here, probably at this point, early in the new year, relating to the work we did in September. And it's really encouraging looking material that we have. And another key point, it appears down in this area, we're kind of calling it the Charlie zone. We're also seeing evidence that the arsenopyrite's not just focused in the veins, but actually disseminated through the units, through the rock units. Now down here, it's somewhat less weathered than up here. So we can get a better handle with all this digging we were doing late in September in terms of what the host rocks are. There's a lot of volcanics down here. If we have a combination of high grade and potentially booming high grade gold hosted in veins and disseminated throughout the rocks, we're going to have a combination, much greater widths, tonnage potential to go with the very high grade material that I am sure, well, we've already drilled some of it, narrow. But do remember, John, with some of the holes we put out this year that, you know, even though we had the narrow hits, that was within a much broader envelope as well of, you know, 9-10 meters of lower grade stuff. So this is just the beginning of the story, and we're on top of it. I think we're onto it. And I think the plan for the forthcoming year is going to be to focus right down in this area. And we might put in 3 or 4 pads, and we're thinking at this point maybe drill to the west northwest generally, because that should give us an intercept of these different orientations regardless, right? With the orientation, if we drill the right way, we'll be able to intercept them. And so I'm very excited by what's coming here, and hopefully what will come from the follow-on work we do next season at Snoball.
So Kevin, is this the right direction here? Sorry, did I get that right?
Which direction, John?
You said west northwest. Am I interpreting?
Yeah, that's actually more north the way you're looking there. Okay. Yeah, that's right. It's a little awkward here, but yes, this dashed line is southwest down here. Yeah, that's west north up here. Okay, now so this is Pyramid Peak. Snowball Ridge, as people know, starts right here and continues about 1 kilometer along, and we have sampled material all along that ridge. There's clearly outlying veins there too, but obviously we want to find some real juice that's got the high grades coupled with some really good widths. And given that we're very high up here, people will note this is not deep down in the bottom of the valley, we're up high here. In theory, we must have the whole system in place below this peak. So if we can get stuck into some of this high-grade material right up here on surface, in theory, we should be able to walk it down hundreds of meters, because the difference in elevation between here and Snowball Pond, for example, is like 400 or 500 meters vertical. So some people ask, about the challenging topography, and it is steep here. But in certain circumstances, we could make it work very much to our advantage. And that's one of them, stepping drills down the mountainside, right? Just to follow. And that's potentially true as well from a mining perspective. If this was to emerge, for example, as a potential high-grade underground mining situation, you would not necessarily need to have shafts, which are really expensive. You could add it in from the mountainside. So early stage, at the minute, we're really just focused on delivering a zone that has real grade and widths to it. And I think there's a good chance we can do that in the next kick at the can next summer.
So based on what you've said here, Kevin, you think not only is there high grade potential, but there's also potential for more of like bulk tonnage material as well, right? That's still on the table.
Yeah, now to clarify on that point, John, it doesn't mean that this is porphyry style bulk tonnage, right? Yeah. We had thought in the early going, and this is an intrusion related system. You and I have talked about that before. And by the way, we're right on the BCGS red line here again. I mentioned that before. It's just behind Pyramid Peak, just down in the dip here behind the peak. That's the contact, a major fault again, Northmore Fault. So there's clearly an intrusive system here, diorite bodies that have come up along the fault and intruded into these sediments, these volcanic derived sediments here. And, so we have the whole system in place. The disseminated style will probably be more disseminated in consequence of it being structurally, somehow the fluids have gotten in through the structures and maybe altered broader volumes of rock that way through porosity and such like. But it's not that there's necessarily an intrusive core that's carrying a lot of value. Like up at Saddle, we have Saddle North, which is a major intrusion that's mineralized itself. We could be wrong though. You start to drill, maybe we will drill into intrusive that's mineralized here. But at the minute, the focus is high grade vein hosted gold, silver, and possibly disseminated as well through these units.
Okay. Is there any good analogy in the Golden Triangle to another known deposit that Snowball and some of what your early drilling has encountered? Like, is there another system elsewhere in the Golden Triangle you can refer to or refer people to that there's some similarities there or strong similarities?
There are clearly going to be similarities in terms of the style. It is, broadly speaking, epithermal style, but I'd have to turn you over to Charlie Gregg, our key technical advisor on that, John. To be honest, at the minute, I think it's a little early for us to really say anything conclusive with any confidence about what we really have here. There's just so little known at the minute, but it's different. For example, at the minute, it does Saddle South, which was a project we've done an enormous amount of work on. That is a very sulfide rich epithermal vein system, which has very little quartz in it, or what quartz there is very fine, a lot of carbonate. And for that reason, the rain dissolves the carbonate and you're not left with anything visual on surface, which is kind of odd because usually the quartz is, if you have a lot of it, will indicate a vein system. It's resistant to weathering. Here you can see that Pyramid Peak is highly weathered. Interestingly enough, there is not a lot of visible quartz on the surface here either. It's weathered, there's strong anomalism. So, it may be somewhat akin to Saddle South. We'll see. We think these sediments may have been wet when the intrusives came in. It's a back arc kind of volcanic setting, a lot of volcanism, and these sediments may have been incompletely lithified, So, but we're just speculating really at this point.
Too early. Okay. I did want to touch on, obviously this is an important aspect, is the, your capital situation, the financing. You were able to, you were looking to raise, I believe, 3.5 million early in the year. You were able to complete a first tranche, 1.3 million, I believe. So how much do you need to raise to really do the work that you want to do next year? And, when are you I guess you're going to wait for the assay results for the remainder of the holes to come in, and then you'd be looking to raise. Do you have a number in mind that you're going to need?
We don't have a firm number in mind yet, simply because we have not actually determined exactly what we want to do yet on both these properties. And partly that's because we haven't had our assays back. So it all really comes back to assays. But John, we will need millions to unfold these programs, whatever that level is. So yes, in the summertime, we had originally anticipated using the bulk of our funds, both from the IPO in October last year, as well as the subsequent May financing, which Sprott and a few others came in on. We were planning to use that to achieve our discovery or discoveries on both these properties. We were never really sure which was superior in our view. They were both kind of equal, and we did our IPO with 2 technical reports, not one, which is unusual. That reflected the fact we thought both properties were really strong. Going back to a comment or question you had before, we haven't killed either, of course. Yes, it's often the case you do your first season of work and you kill one or the other or both. I can honestly say at the minute, both properties are just as good as they were prior to the start of the season in our perspective. We haven't been able yet to differentiate. They both got significant potential in the near term. Somewhat different styles, of course. So we have that. We had hoped to close the financing, let's say, the middle of August last year. I think our first results from Snowball weren't as good as we hoped for, of course, and that always makes financing more difficult. Nonetheless, I think for those who care to pay attention to Snowball, the details of what we did achieve, and it's true of Golden Lion and what's to come, you can see where the potential lies in the very near future on both these properties. But we did decide late in August that we'd go for a tranched financing, roughly $1 million of hard dollar and another couple of million of flow through. And we made a conscious decision, I thought in shareholders' interest, just to close it off at one tranche until or at least focus on the hard dollar aspect until we actually got the remainder of our assays in, both from Golden Lion and Snowball, because we've always felt they had terrific potential, and we were willing to wait and see. The lab gave us multiple times revised schedules through the course of late September, October, November, and I can honestly say not once have they achieved those revised schedules, and they're still not. But so at this point in time, here we are, what are we at, the 10th of December. We decided we're not going to do any financing until we've got all the assays out. People have asked about our cash situation. They don't need to worry about us running out of money. Any one of us insiders can put in money into this company. Many of us have warrants and options. I'm going to put money in soon. I've just decided we're going to get our assays back, understand what we've got, and then we will circle back probably to some of our existing shareholders, Sprott and others. And I'm quite confident we'll be able to raise money. We've certainly been approached, but there's no rush to do it right now. And I'm anticipating, honestly, I don't think we'll see all our assays, both from Snowball, maybe not even from Golden Lion now until sometime in January. We're hoping in the near term to have results out enough to get us another Golden Lion main results. We've got 5 more holes to come from there. And I think you're going to see a continuation of what we've already delivered. I mean, it's consistent what's going on there, right? People can have confidence in it. And then I'd like to have another result release from Snowball as well. I think that's important. So there'll be news flow, and then we'll finance at some point thereafter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna, Kevin, if you're up for it, I have some questions from our community. I could,
sure,
if you're up for it.
Yeah.
We'll get to a few of them anyway. Do you have any sort of idea in mind for how many meters you're gonna do in 2021, or is it still too early?
It's still too early, John. We don't know. But I think I mentioned we concept like a Snowball for 4 pads there that would be focused on Charlie Zone, that area. Golden Lion, we really haven't got there yet. We're maybe in some ways a little more advanced in our thinking about Snowball than Golden Lion because we just don't have our assays for Golden Lion. Yeah.
Okay. One of the questions was, are you excited about more Snowball or Golden Lion? I think you've already covered that. I think both can be good. And
I'm excited about both.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah. They're both. I can tell you, Golden Lion, the drilling is easy. I'm talking about the ability of the drillers to make core.
Yeah.
The rock is competent, easy to drill. They love it. It's got that advantage. That was not the case actually at Snowball in the drilling from Pyramid Peak this summer. It was, as I mentioned, so weathered. That's actually a challenge. Not only was the weather itself a challenge, but the weathered rock was a challenge. Those guys sometimes just couldn't get the drill through the stuff, or the core recoveries were poor. That will change for the better next year too, because as I said, the new targeting just down slope a bit, it's much less weathered, the rock. So cross your fingers on that.
Okay. One person asked a question, and I kind of had a similar question in mind. At Golden Lion, you have your camp in place. Do you think you can return to work earlier in the season next year?
Oh, for sure, yes. That's a major advantage, having that camp back there, for sure. You know, I think I mentioned we certainly had some budget overruns this year, and because of the weather, especially the delays, when your productivity is half, like at Snowball, what you anticipate. And what does that practically mean? It means like where we were planning at Snowball to finish the drilling July 28th, it finished August 18th, you know, the same meters. So you have a whole camp, all of that infrastructure, sometimes people sitting around not doing too much. It drives your costs up. At Golden Lion, we have a very good camp, and we thought for safety and productivity reasons that it was worth putting it in. And yeah, so we should be able to get back there sooner this coming year.
Okay. There's a few other questions here from the group, but I think we've covered a lot of them. But one of them it's an interesting question. I like questions like this. What was the biggest lesson you learned this year, and something that you'll try to improve on in 2021?
I think the cautionary tale from season 2020 was the difficulty in forecasting accurately on a project that you've never drilled before, a remote project. That was the single biggest. We were, of course, surprised by the weather, but these other factors. So I think that's probably to be more cautious in terms of your ability to actually do a certain amount of work in your first kick at the can. Most people would probably think, well, that's not surprising. It's kind of true in life in general, right? Almost any project you take under, if you've never done it before, i.e. if you, what I try to educate some viewers, investors on is the fact that we're in a really tough, we're at the very toughest part of this business. You know, it's tough setting out to achieve a discovery on these properties, especially where you've not got any prior drilling experience. Obviously, we had experience with sampling and this and that for years, but it's different when you set up that complex operation because you just don't know till you get into it. For example, what challenges the drillers may face actually getting the drills. That odd situation at Snowball with the, you know, devil's blanket behind the peak, that was something none of us anticipated. So I think next time, if on future properties never drilled, we will be more cautious in our budgeting, that's for sure.
Okay. And I think you've answered this one already, but I'll throw it out again. What was the biggest challenge in 2020? I think it sounds like it's probably a toss-up between the weather and the labs, right? Is it probably a fair statement?
Yes, it is a toss-up between the two. The weather had a major impact on us, and the labs were right up there too. So, yep, those two, John.
Okay, well, hey, Kevin, it's been great to chat with you. Good to catch up. It's been a very thorough interview. There's lots of information here. So I hope that answers questions that people might have had about the deposit. And obviously, it's a waiting game now as you wait for the next assays to come in and you get a fuller picture of what you have at Golden Lion, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I would say, John, anybody who cares to contact me, whether they're current shareholders or not, I'm always happy to hear from them. I respond in person. They can email me or call me. I respond to everybody. There's no middle person involved in terms of at this stage of the company. So feel free to get hold of me and I'll respond to people. And I do appreciate their support. And I would just say that they should really focus on the details of what we put out, whether it's the press releases or the presentations. There is a lot of thought that goes into them. And there's usually some juice in there if you care to really read the details, Mm-hmm. So, and the website, by the way, has been rebuilt. There's a lot of new material up there just since the beginning of the month as well.
Yeah, a lot of really good information in the presentation, some of which we've covered today. And yeah, I think if you look into some of the slides and you can see, you came sort of close to hitting really great holes, not quite, but next year have some great targets. So I think 2021 will be an exciting season. And, right now, I guess people can, if they see the same excitement and potential, they can take advantage of, cheaper prices, get in a lot cheaper than where you were trading a few months ago, right? So
absolutely. I mean, it's just the way it is. And the other thing I'd say before we go is volatility is the name of the game in this business at the early stage, where you're just a hope machine. You're trying to deliver a discovery. And you know what? Even if you deliver an outstanding discovery, I've told people this, it doesn't mean that you won't go up and give it all back again, even if you have something substantial. In the early going, it's that. A lot of them don't understand how volatile it can be. Yeah. But gee, you can really make good money if you get in. Maybe not when it's running, but try to move on things before it starts
to run.
And then you get your profits. Do take some of them, because I can't hold the stock up. I tell you, nobody can hold the stock up in these early stage plays. What my focus is, and I know our whole team, Charlie and everybody, we want to deliver something that has got real merit to it, that could become a mine. And we'll feel good about ourselves if we can do that, notwithstanding the volatility. If you discover something of merit, ultimately you will end up there permanently, but it's going to be kind of sickening at times getting there, right?
roller coaster. And there's quite a, I think the Golden Triangle, especially from my own experience, just you have that very big seasonality to it as well. A lot of people seem to sell off towards, just before assays are out or right after assays are out. And there's that dead period sort of in the winter time where it's challenging, but that's when some of the smart players pick up the cheap shares and right. If they understand the play, there's that opportunity. So it can go both ways. So,
yeah.
All right, Kevin, well, appreciate your time today.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Until next time, you be well, stay safe, and we'll keep in touch.
Okay. Take care.
Cheers.